Hello and welcome to Gamma's Sustainability Podcast. I'm Chris Smith, Gamma's ESG Programme Manager, and we are here today to talk about sustainability. What is it and why is it important? I'm delighted to have with me today John Gladstone from one of our key suppliers, Softcat, and Michael O'Hara from one of our sustainability partners, Techies Go Green. Sustainability at Gamma has been a long-standing commitment. We've been a carbon neutral company since 2006. And in 2020, we started to take steps on our journey to committing to becoming a net zero organisation through achievements such as the SBTi verification of our net zero goals last year and the recruitment of a dedicated team of ESG professionals to drive our sustainability agenda forwards. We are on our way to that. However, it's a collaborative effort. And having along with me today people such as John, Michael and my colleague Callum is an excellent opportunity to discuss what is sustainability, why is it important to organisations, and what can we do to get people on the journey. So I'm going to start with asking you guys, to each of you, if you can describe to me what is sustainability to you in your organisations. John, I'm going to come to you first.
So look, I think sustainability, depending on where you are on your journey, means different things. So we went very early on, sustainability just meant environmental, but also we were also very strong in the social side, but we obviously refer to that as DE&I. So, from our perspective, and keeping on to from a Softcat aspect, so sustainability is the overarching piece of ESG. ESG is how we deliver it, how we use those towers to deliver sustainability throughout the business.
Mm-hmm. And is it ingrained in Softcat? Would you say?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, look, there's always more that can be done. But we have a fantastic, amount of support from the board through the leadership team, senior leadership team, throughout, employees and colleagues. So, yeah, it is definitely ingrained. I think we all know the tech industry has a long way to go, and a lot of space to catch up on, and there's a lot of headwinds. But within Softcat, certainly, definitely 100% ingrained.
And Michael, what's sustainability to you, and what are Techies Go Green doing?
Yeah, so sustainability, the UN definition of sustainability is the ability to meet your present day needs without compromising the needs of future generations. So that means basically you leave the planet for the next generation in the state that you got it. And that's a huge problem I'm a bit older than you guys, so for my generation. Just a couple of stats on that. From 1970, wildlife has reduced by 69%. Fish stocks have reduced by 90%. Coral reefs, 50% of coral reefs are dead. 25% of all plants and animals are threatened by extinction, and greenhouse gas emissions have gone up by 90%. So it's happened on our watch, and unfortunately, we've a big job to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Your watch.
My watch.
So what are Techies Go Green doing then? Because obviously Softcat's a technology firm operating in the channel, whereas to some of the people watching this, we might not be aware of Techies Go Green.
Sure. So we're a sustainability movement set up actually 4 years ago in March 21 in the middle of COVID, and it was set up. I worked in the tech sector for over 30 years, and it was set up focusing on that tech bubble that we worked in, resellers, vendors, and so on. And we went, announced it, did some press, and we got feedback not just from our industry, but from businesses outside the industry. Thought it was great. See, tech is seen as very innovative, and they asked could they join. So we had a bit of a rethink, and first of all we said, well, climate change is not selective. It's going to affect all of us, no matter who you are or where you are. And secondly, tech is an integral part of every business today. And so we're not going to be selective. We'll help every business we can. So what we do numerous events throughout the year, be they online, be they trade shows, or be our own events. We are regularly posting on social case studies, blog posts. We do monthly webinars where we get subject matter experts to speak on the big sustainability issues out there. And ultimately, it's about providing information that's educational, motivational, and hopefully inspirational, that helps businesses on their sustainability journey.
And what have you helped organisations do so far then?
Well, we have over 700 companies now signed up across the UK and Ireland, and they're operating in over 30 different industries, from pharma to healthcare, finance, insurance, agriculture, tourism, construction, and so on. And they go from large multinationals right down to SMEs. Obviously, we have a lot of tech companies in there as well, I should add. And it's really the SMEs are struggling. The larger companies, they can put a team in place, they can hire the outside consultants, but the SMEs really are struggling. And we try to help them, we'll help every company on that journey.
So, Callum, I've not asked you yet. Sustainability.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it? Sustainability, from the outside looking in, it's just such an umbrella term. Of course, Michael's given us a really succinct definition about what sustainability is, but I think it can take on different meanings depending on who you are and what business you operate in. I think a really key theme that is emerging, certainly in the work that I'm doing, is the concept of materiality. When we talk about sustainability, it's not, or should I say, it's no longer throwing a net zero proposition on the table. What are your material emission sources? And looking outside of that, as we know full well at Gamma, what can we do to promote a circular economy? What can we do to actually make an impact in taking action against the scandal of electrical waste and the damage that does to the environment? And equally, what is aligned to our mission, our business strategy, so we can go out there and actually deliver social value that is aligned to the work that we do, as opposed to throwing money at an arbitrary charity. So sustainability at Gamma to me means, quite simply a few things. It means taking responsibility for our biggest electrical emission source, our data centre in Trafford Park, which we are really keen to transform in a sustainable way. It means engaging with our supply chain to absolutely take emissions reduction activity and circular economy activity as well. And when it comes to social value, actually, I think the key thing for me in delivering sustainability is that we can actually take action to bridge the divide that we see in society between people that have access to, connectivity, internet services, electrical goods, and those that don't, and that digital divide that we're seeing increasingly emerge in society. So that to me is where we are at, and I look forward to working as much as I can to deliver on some of those initiatives to actually bring about some meaningful change.
So we talked there's some different perspectives there on what sustainability is, and I think everyone's singing to the same hymn sheet there really, which is obviously really good news. Moving on from what it is, what can businesses do about it? So for organisations, Gamma has a lot of channel partners. We've got thousands across the UK, been increasingly in Europe now as well. What can businesses who have not started their sustainability journey, what sort of things can they do? And then John and Mike, I'll ask you in turn to answer that question.
I'll go here. Okay. So, look, all of us here in this room and everyone in the UK and across the world, we all buy and consume products and services that businesses produce and sell. So businesses have a special responsibility to become sustainable. And also, it becomes such a huge thing, for companies and for a country and all that. There's 68 million people in the UK. There's 5.5 million businesses. So rather than try and boil the ocean and all of us need to become more sustainable, if we can get businesses to become carbon neutral, net zero, then that will reduce the emissions of all of us as individuals as well.
I did some research as part of a preparation for an event last year, and UK small businesses in the UK contribute, it's a collective, a disproportionate amount of emissions and waste in the UK economy compared to large companies. I think it's the businesses of smaller than 250 people, if I remember this rightly, are contributing somewhere near 50% in both categories, and which shows the immense impact that small companies can have if everyone gets on if everyone kind of commits to that journey, doesn't it? John, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been involved with Techies Go Green pretty much since the start as an ambassador as well. So I've sort of been involved in the conversations that Michael's alluding to there. The interesting thing is that we do a lot of talking to customers, and supplier days, things like that. And what I always find, it's not frustrating, but I find surprising, is that the smaller organisations sort of say, oh, well, I just can't compete. I can't do what the larger organisations are doing. And when you actually break it down, we're not doing anything particularly complex. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you actually, show it on a piece of paper with somebody with no experience in it, would potentially, turn their eyes and think, wow, that is complex. But, look, we concentrate, as, Mike was saying, the energy tariffs that we use, for a smaller organisation, it's actually easier to pivot and make change. And when we talk about investment, it's not a huge amount of investment. And the one thing I've always really understood is that if you're a sustainable business, you become more attractive. You become more attractive to either employees, to new business or existing business, talent, and then also investment. So, is that it's kind of like when you hear smaller organisations say like, oh well, we can't do it or we can't. I don't think that's true. Yeah. And going back to that point, as a Softcat, we sort of pride ourselves. We've probably got one of the lowest emissions intensity ratios either per employee or per revenue spent. Sorry, per revenue on an annual basis. But that just kind of comes down to efficiency as well. The larger organisations, we're efficient, right? If we see issues, and we will try and make the processes more efficient to make us more, operational profitable. But that's probably what you just don't get in those smaller organisations. If there's a problem, they potentially don't solve that problem. They work with that problem. But sustainability is just really about efficiency as well. So, I sort of disagree that these smaller organisations can't do more. But we are there to help them get on that journey.
What do you think's holding them back then?
I think a lot of it is knowledge. As we said earlier, is that and this is what we've always said, is that no one really tells organisations like these are the steps that you should take. People, I think the scope 1 and scope 2, for example, is the simplest ones to calculate in theory, and they think it's a bit of a mystery. And it's like, well, you could just take your energy bills and add to, your electrical usage on a monthly basis, and do some simple conversion, and there you go. You've got your scope 1 emissions. Do the same for gas. Work out how many miles you've done. It's not. As I said, I think that with sustainability, we make this landscape extremely complex, and I think that like Techies Go Green, going out to help organisations break it down into much simpler.
We'll move the rocks in which stopping them from falling.
Absolutely.
But I think every business wants to be sustainable, and when they go and look at it, because they're not experts, it's new. And when they go and look at it, they're hit with a wall of information like scope 1, 2, 3, carbon neutral, carbon negative, carbon zero, the UN SDGs, and they kind of say, oh, there's a lot more of this than I thought. And I'll look at that later. And the problem is that later can be pushed out. So, and that's what we do in Techies Go Green. We try and, as I say, remove those rocks that's stopping them from making progress. And as John says, a lot of the efficiencies can be got quite easily, without having to spend a lot of money, put sensors in, changing your lights to LEDs and so on. So,
It's I look at it like this, is that if a small organisation, if someone turned around and said, we'll award you a, £15 million contract next week if you made these changes, they'd make those changes, right? They'd find the capital, they'd find the investment, and they'd do it. But because that sort of offering isn't there necessarily, it's kind of like what comes first, the chicken or the egg. And because they're not under that legislative pressure, they probably don't take it as, or act on it as soon as they could.
I think that's exactly it, isn't it? We've already covered the perception issue regarding, complexity and knowledge. But exactly as you're alluding to there, John, there is probably also a perception issue that sustainability costs, and it's a direct odds with the bottom line mission to make profit, which obviously small businesses are just utterly determined to do. And I think it's exactly as you say, the lack of exposure to the commercial incentives that I think medium-sized and upward businesses are really starting to appreciate. I don't know if you would subscribe to that view.
No, absolutely. And I think, and there is elements that, Softcat, we've got solar projects, we've done solar projects recently. They are costly, slow ROIs, but it's that behaviour, it's doing the right behaviours as well. And I think that companies get put off by, electrifying their fleet, and doing solar panels and all the really nice to haves. They just don't do the basics, which actually, when written on paper, looks just as impressive as the reason the big organisations are doing this is because they have to, and they've done the basics, they've done the low-hanging fruits, and now they're going for those top-shelf investments to make that bigger impact. That's what happened with Softcat. Is that we electrified our fleet, which and put in solar panels, which in turn helped us reduce our emissions, scope 1 and 2 emissions by over 50%. But then where do you go? You get to that point of then you're in that Formula One, those marginal gains piece.
I was going to say you go into
that 1 and 2%. How do you get that further reduction? And that can only be done by infrastructure change. So there's an ongoing battle, and if anything, I do think that the smaller organisations that can not necessarily invest more, just actually look at it, change their tariffs, think about their actions, can make a lot more progress than larger organisations will over the next coming decades.
And being sustainable is about being efficient, which will bring down your costs. And you got to look at it over more than a 1 year environment or scenario. The cost of, say, putting solar panels in is big in year one, but you get the savings, for up to 25 years afterwards. Mm-hmm. So a lot of businesses are kind of, looking at shareholder return as maximizing the profits, and they want to do that, and they don't want to spend that money now, even though it's going to be beneficial down the way. Mm-hmm. So you got to look at it not from a shareholder, but from a stakeholder point of view.
Yeah.
So,
but bear in mind, bear in mind that there is no incentives for organisations. We're hitting people with national insurance rises. We're hitting, there's a lot of taxonomy in other areas, but there's no reward currently. So the only reward from is to potentially become more attractive. To either win more business or attract talent and investment, etc.
And I think that's key, because one of the things I was going to ask you guys is about how do you overcome resistance to change, and it's actually you need to demonstrate the value in the quick wins. I've come from a business change background before moving into my sustainability role, and it was all about demonstrating value. It was all about getting the quick wins, getting the buy-in from the people who are going to be your key stakeholders, the people who are going to influence your decision making. If you can demonstrate those efficiencies early on, get your quick wins, switch to renewable tariffs. That's a really, really, really easy one to do. And as you said, John, just look at utility bills elsewhere. How much are things costing you? How much are you utilising? All of a sudden, you're starting to develop your understanding of what your carbon footprint is. And then once you start measuring it, you can start to work out what action you can take. We've been on that journey, I think, where we've exercised all our quick wins, or we've delivered on a number of our quick wins, and actually the task is now to go, what's our big ticket items? And we've talked about the data centre. We've got our fleet to electrify, and I like coming and pick your brains about that on another day, John. We've got our fleet to electrify. We've got gas sources in different parts of our business, in our offices. Those things are a bit more chunky to get hold of, but once we've got over them, it is into that marginal gains. There's, everything's a bit, and your emission sources are smaller. How do you make those efficiencies? You look at your lighting, then you look at where you can start to cut bits out of your network. And we explore in another podcast what we're doing in our network for that to achieve that. So really good points, guys. Thank you for that. What about, so we talked about scope 1 and 2 a bit here. What about scope 3? So what can a company do to take action on scope 3 emissions? Callum, if you start us off with describing what scope 3 is.
Yeah, absolutely. So scope 3, if I could describe it in layman's terms, are your indirect emissions. They are the emission sources that you largely do not control. The vast majority of an organisation's scope 3 emissions are going to be held up in their supply chain, so what we call purchased goods and services. And so it follows that the single most effective action you can take is to collaborate and engage your key suppliers. And I can speak on Gamma's behalf here and say that we have a top-heavy supply chain. So that task is actually easier than it may first seem. Than going off to look at thousands, if not tens of thousands of suppliers. Actually focusing on your key suppliers and how you can collaborate to make emissions reductions, or if circular economy improvements or whatever it is. I think if I can embellish the point on scope 3 and say it does get a bad rap, I don't think that a lot of people are able to clearly see the value in taking action in the supply chain to reduce scope 3 emissions when the emissions calculations are fairly flimsy in the first place. We still in the industry, and forget telecoms and wider in the economy, rely so much on spend-based estimates to get our calculations, actually understand where our impacts lie. I think that is quite off-putting for people at an executive level to really sponsor action to drive emissions reductions or wider environmental benefits.
John, what's your view on scope 3? Because you're active in this space, aren't you, and trying to influence the policy?
Yeah, so we're similar businesses, right? So 84% of our emissions sit in our goods and services. So within that 84%, we've got a 96.4% mix of that. So 4% is goods not for resale, everything that we consume as Softcat, and then 96% is everything that we sell. And I totally agree with everything Callum's just said, is that spend-based is like the root of all evil in a way. It really is. And it's especially hard for organisations that are growing quickly. Softcat, we grow, double-digit growth, annually. So when you've got everything going in one direction, then you're still relying on spend-based information for, I would probably say 70% of our, supply chain. It's tough because, unless you're getting that activity-based data and your suppliers are actively reducing their emissions throughout their products and services, you're still not going to be able to get that recognition of that reduction, and then you get into all sorts of things. Depending on discounts, one person could be spending X and the other person's getting the same product for Y, and which then that converts into emissions. So we move from spend-based with our hardware to volume, and then we're going to continually progress that using other platforms and softwares that are out there to activity-based as soon as we can. So. Scope 3 is just this thing. But the one thing interesting about Scope 3 that I will say is that I speak to a number of customers, and if you're in the finance sector, like a bank or a mortgage company, then all your emissions are in assets, capital assets. So it's interesting how we're all, as I always say, same storm, different boats. But yeah, we are really struggling to try and reduce those emissions from scope 3, especially, as I said, if you're a growing business, business travel, employee commuting, waste, it really is hard.
It's difficult to crack, isn't it? And when you can't, if you don't feel like you've got that, the measurements right, if you don't feel like they're an accurate a sort of account of what your emissions are, it's very difficult to know what action to take in scope 3, isn't it? So it tends to come through collaboration, doesn't it? Or engagement with your suppliers, engagement, trying to talk to them and influence them just to get their 1 and 2 right. Just to get the more companies that can get their 1 and 2 right, the more accurate this whole sort of carbon accounting.
They do say that if everyone had renewable energy, across your supply chain, then there would be a scope 3.
Yeah.
So that is the other way to look at it. But my final point as well is that I think it's really key that companies do use things like intensity ratios. Is that we as Softcat, we may have seen a slight increase we saw a decrease FY22, FY23, FY23 to FY24, we saw a slight increase. But then, as I said earlier, it was completely decoupled against that double-digit revenue growth. So, is that actually when you start looking at our intensity ratios per employee or per pound of revenue, our behaviour is absolutely correct. But people just look at this number, their emissions increased by 4%. Well, yeah, it did, but what you're not taking into consideration, the business grew 12%, and emissions grew 4%. So, it is really important that you also have the backing, of the board, the leadership teams that actually understand that as well.
I think John's example regarding financial institutions is really interesting. Kind of brings back into the picture the theme of materiality. I don't think, in fact, I know that the masses are not particularly interested in a company that works in that industry, let's say Bank B. They're not particularly interested in their electricity contracts. What they're interested in is what they're investing in, what are they funding? And as we've seen in recent months and years, it's not necessarily about oil and gas. It could be, conflicts abroad. It can be, are you investing in companies that are, mining in an unethical way or perceived to be, operating unethically? So it's, I think, really important to make that distinction as well, that Scope 3 can matter more depending on the business that you are and the sector that you're operating in. Ultimately, though, and despite all of the complexities around the calculations and some of the challenges that we have to deal with in sustainability, I think getting yourselves an ethical procurement policy and embedding some key principles into the procurement decisions that you're making has definitely got legs, and it does make a difference. I think that engagement piece is actually just as important as measuring and trying to make sure your emissions are falling, whether that be in nominal terms or through an intensity ratio.
There's a little bit of a plea there from you. It's a bit about what you can do to get things right. So just thinking about how we sort of round this up, Michael. I'm gonna come to you. What would your advice be to businesses now, just if they're wondering about whether to start to take steps in their sustainability journey or not? What would your advice to those be? And what can Techies Go Green do to help them?
Just on that last point, to say that it's guesstimation in terms of emissions. I think we all just need to get our head around it, except it's not an exact science, but this is the direction in which the emissions from whatever it is activity that you're measuring. This is a good indication of the emissions, and we are, as AI and other technologies come along, we are starting to be able to measure them in a more exact way. So just on that, but businesses of all shapes and sizes need to get started on this journey if they haven't already. And I don't care if you're a very small business that's just generating a couple of tons of emissions a year. Every ton that goes into the atmosphere, it lasts for years in there. Methane, for example, lasts around 12 years, but it is 84 times more potent in trapping heat in the atmosphere than CO2. And that's really important today, as our greenhouse gas emissions are nearly at the ceiling of what's acceptable. CO2 itself, not as potent, but it lasts for hundreds of years, maybe up to 1,000 years. So it's very important that every business looks and try and reduce its emissions. And we've measured the social cost of a ton of greenhouse gas emissions, and it's calculated at €1,000 per ton. And that's covering health, agriculture, energy costs, natural disasters, and so on. And it's funny, cost of an offset is like 60 quid. So it's a total mismatch there.
Yeah.
So it's vitally important, I would say, that every business looks to reduce its emissions.
And to some of our partners out there who may not have started their journey at Techies Go Green, get on your website, find some quick wins, can't we?
We have some fantastic resources, and they're freely available for everyone who signs up to Techies Go Green.
Fantastic. Has anyone any sort of final thoughts on the importance of sustainability, why it matters?
Well, I was just going to ask John briefly. I mean, we got some pretty stark statistics at the opening of this recording from Michael about, I guess, the parlour state of the natural environment. John, what are the key things that Softcat right now are doing, and what have you done and delivered on to support the aim of reducing those impacts?
Yeah, so what we're working on at the moment, so I mean, the biggest piece that we've done, we have what's called the 10 in 10, which is 10 goals over 10 years. I think we have that for a couple of reasons. One, it's measure impact and how we're progressing on those 10. We've got our science-based targets, both near and long term. But what we delivered, renewable energy, 100% renewable energy across all of our locations. Again, there's always hurdles. So we talk about this growing business. I think that people don't realise actually how tough it is for organisations to remain sustainable while they grow. So we're currently just moved our London office location. So we've been gas free in our London office location for a number of years, and then now we've taken gas back on for a period while they do some upgrades and things like that. So there's always moving posts, is what I'm trying to say, is that the more sustainable we become, you'll find hurdles. So 100% renewable energy, working on that gas-free across all our locations still. Obviously, we electrified our fleet, so that reduced our Scope 1 emissions a lot by about 90 tonnes a year, which doesn't sound much, but again, we're already at that quite lean organisation. Just the solar panels across our Marlow head office, so that reduces. Last year, we haven't had a full year of installation. That will be coming about April, May time, but we already saw a reduction of 25%. But again, we also have the EV car schemes for our employees, so we've got 24 chargers at Marlow. So you sort of pay, rob Peter to pay Paul. So we've seen our emissions go down and our energy usage decrease. Yeah, it isn't on the percentage that we expected. We've got an electric fleet now, so we did more draw. So, but yeah, look, just going on to our Scope 3, continuous work across that. How do we incentivise employees to business travel? We've got new business travel portals to drive those, the adoption, to make sure we're able to track emissions. Commuting, we've got every scheme I think that we possibly can do, EV car schemes, right to work schemes. So we've got a lot of work around our benefits to drive that. So, and then the supply management. I think you came to our partner forum, and I think you came as well. So we have our annual sustainability sessions within our partner forums on an annual basis to drive that messaging and adoption. So we are definitely doing what we can across.
Well, we look up to you guys in sustainability. You guys are, a good standard, gold standard for us to.
We appreciate it. But it can all change. It can all change.
But you know what? Through conversations like this, hopefully we, like you say, we can all change. We can inspire more companies to get on the journey. And I'm going to close now. And firstly, say thank you so much for your time. What a great conversation.
Pleasure.
Lots of takeaways, and really, really difficult to summarise. But I'm going to try. So. Scope 3 is difficult, but don't let that stop you getting on with Scope 1 and 2. If you want to start somewhere with your Scope 1 or 2 emissions, start with your energy bills. It can be really straightforward. Look in there, you can find efficiencies in your organisation. Actually, not just efficiencies from an emissions perspective, but you'll find some cost efficiencies in them as well. It's really important to engage with your supply chain. Supply chain can help you. Everyone that works in this space will offer their support and collaborate. You may be asked to help with for your customers as well. Let's get started. The message is clear. We need, as a society, to be moving forward and taking action to start to mitigate our impact on the environment. So, with that, I'll close. Thank you very much for coming today, guys. It's been really great to chat to you, and we'll speak to you all again soon. Look out for more sustainability podcasts coming soon from Gamma.